Masechet Makkot Daf Chaf Bet. Yesterday in the Mishnah we mentioned a case where one does one action of plowing and yet will be liable to 8 counts of lashes. And the case was Chodesh Beshod Vechamor, so he's using kilayim, 2 different animals, to plow together, and also their hekdesh, and also they are plowing kilayim of wheat in a vineyard. It's also a year of Shivi'it, and it's Yom Tov, so they're plowing on Yom Tov, and the guy is a Kohen and a Nazir, and the place that they are plowing is a cemetery or has some corpses in it, place of Tum'ah. And so that adds up to 8. So now we're going to follow up on that and have a question. Amar le'ulad Rav Nachman, v'lil kename mishum zoreya beyom tov. Why do you only count 8? Why not count also sowing on Yom Tov? This is based on the previous discussion that said that if there's seeds, 2 seeds of diverse kinds, and one covers it up, just covering it up is prohibited in terms of kilayim, meaning that that's also a form of sowing. Sowing is not just dropping the seeds into the ground, but also covering it up is a part of the activity of planting, of sowing. And therefore, one should be liable not only for the melacha of plowing, which is one melacha, but there's another melacha of sowing, zoreya. So why don't you add that as well? Amar le Tana v'shiyer. Rav Nachman says, oh yeah, the author of the Mishnah mentioned 8, but in fact there are other ones, and you could add more. Amar le Tana katani shemonavat, Amar Tana v'shiyer. Ula says that doesn't make sense, because the Tana took the time to give a number. It said 8. 8 means specifically 8. There are some times when the Mishnah has a list without a number, and it gives a list of 2 or 3 items, but it's not necessarily a comprehensive list. It might be leaving out 2 or 3 or more other items. It just wanted to give a few examples. But if you say 8, it means specifically 8. So this is not a good answer. Amar Rava, yesh chiluk melachot b'Shabbat, ven chiluk melachot b'Yom Tov. Rava answers with a really important principle. When it comes to Shabbat, there is a differentiation between one melacha and the next, so that if someone on Shabbat, let's say in one lapse of unawareness by mistake, he violates multiple melachot. He plants and sows and does some other things, so he is going to be liable to a korban hatat for every melacha, because we differentiate each melacha on Shabbat. That's not true for Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, for violating Yom Tov on purpose, one gets lashes. So if there's one a warning, and then within one period, a person does multiple melachot on Yom Tov, that only gets 1 set of lashes. That's the law, because we do not differentiate. And therefore, although you're right, the person did violate Zoreya and also plowing on Yom Tov, it's still, that altogether will still be only 1 set of lashes. Amar le Ada Teheh. And Ula responded, indeed, that is so. That is a good answer. That is a true principle. However, Abaye is not happy. He says, is that true, that we don't differentiate and require multiple punishments for different melachot on Yom Tov? We have a b'raita that teaches if someone cooks a gid hanasheh in milk on Yom Tov and also eats it, they violate 5 prohibitions, 5 counts of lashes. What are they? Lokem mishum ochel gidid. Gid. Number 1, eating gid hanasheh, just by itself. That's 1. Lokem mishum bashel b'yom tov shelo desorech. Cooking on Yom Tov without a need. You're allowed to cook on Yom Tov if you're going to eat it, but this is not kosher. So if you cook something that's not kosher on Yom Tov, so it's not for eating, then you violate cooking on Yom Tov. Velokem mishum bashel gid bechalav. And you're cooking meat and milk. The gid is meat, even though it's not kosher, but it's still part of the meat of the animal, and so that's cooking meat and milk together. And you're also eating meat and milk, although the gid is not kosher, but eating it is still part of the meat of the animal, so that's another. And also kindling a fire, assuming he kindled a fire in order to cook. A quick kindling fire is not allowed no matter what, even if it is to cook something that you're going to eat. You have to have a fire already. bishulo. Now, if you say that there is no differentiation of melachot on Yom Tov, then he should not get lashes for making a fire, because we already included cooking on Shabbat. And so these are two different melachot. Making a fire and cooking are two separate melachot. And since on Yom Tov, even if you do multiple melachot, that's only counted as one set of lashes, so then why are we counting bishul here? So this baraita seems to show that there is a differentiation of melachot and multiple punishments even on Yom Tov. So to answer this, we say, okay, you know what? Take out havara from this. That's not one of the five, and we'll find another one. We're talking about a case where the animal is also a nevela. It's not a kosher animal. It was not slaughtered, and therefore it's also eating nevela by eating the gida nashe. Question on that. Rabbi Chia taught in a braita that when one does this, and the five prohibitions are split into two categories: 2 for eating and 3 for cooking. And if you're going to swap out the making a fire, that was under the category of cooking. So if you're going to take that out and add nevela, that's a prohibition of eating. And then you're going to have the wrong ratio. Instead of 2 for eating and 3 for cooking, in this new scenario, you're going to have 3 for eating and 2 for cooking. And so that won't fit with Rabbi Chia's baraita. Okay, fine. So take out burning, making a fire, and also leave out nevela. Instead, assume that he's using wood from an asherah tree, idolatrous wood. And there's a prohibition that says that nothing that is avodah zarah can cleave to your hand, meaning you can't get benefit even out of anything that is used for avodah zarah. And so that would be another set of lashes. And so we have 5, and this has to do with the cooking, so it maintains the ratio of Rabbi Chia. Amar le Rav Acha bered Rava le Rav Asher v'lelkename mishum lo tabi to'eba el betecha. However, Rav Acha, the son of Rava, asked Rav Asher, well, if it's trees of Asherah that you're burning, then there would be another set of lashes for another pasuk, also in Devarim, do not bring an abomination into your house, from which we also learn that one cannot derive any benefit from idolatrous items, and that would be another set of lashes. So then it would be 6, not 5. Rather, it's not wood of Asherah that they were using, but you could say it was wood that was consecrated for use in the Bet HaMikdash. So then that has to be used on the Mizbeach in the Bet HaMikdash, but one cannot derive benefit on one's own, because the pasuk says, Asherehem, idolatrous trees you should burn to destroy it, but do not do so for Hashem, meaning something that's consecrated to Hashem. One cannot burn it and destroy it at home. You can burn it for a holy purpose on the Mizbeach, but not at home. And so that would be the 5th prohibition that deserves lashes instead of kindling a fire. And so then we answered all our questions. In fact, there is no differentiation of melachot on Yom Tov. Many melachot on Yom Tov all are liable to one set of lashes. מתקיף לרב הושעיה ותחשוב נעמה הזורע בנחל איתן והזהרתם מהכה אשר לא יעבד בו ולא יזרע. Rav Hoshaya challenges our Mishnah where it says if someone plows, they can violate 8 prohibitions at once and 8 sets of lashes. He wonders why not add another one, that this land is also a place of a forceful stream where they broke the neck of an egla arufa. And the pasuk says regarding that place, which will neither be plowed nor sown. And so if someone is plowing in that area, they would violate this one also. So how come the Mishnah does not add another one? So that's challenge number 1. This is going to be the first of 8 similar challenges. Matkif larav Hananya v'lichshovna meha mocheket Hashem b'halichato v'azhartem hacha v'ibadtem et shemam v'gomer lo tasun ken ladonai Elohechem. Rav Hananya has another challenge. Why do you say only 8? Why not add also someone who erases Hashem's name while he is plowing? For example, there's some paper or a stone or something with God's God's name in it that's in the ground, and while you're plowing, it destroys it. And so then one would be erasing God's name. And the pasuk about that says you should destroy the name of idolatry, but do not do so to Hashem. So why not add that one? We don't answer any of these questions. Matkif ladabi abhu v'dichshov nameha koseset baharto v'azarte mehachai shamer benegat sasarat. Rabbi Abhu says you should add also someone who cuts off a leprous mark. There's a prohibition that says, do not cut off a negat sara'at. You have to watch it, you have to see it, you have to wait till it's cured, but you're not allowed to cut it off. So if someone has a leprous mark, and then while they're plowing, they put their, whatever, it's on their arm, they put the arm near the plow, and the plow cuts off the leprous mark, so then that would be another set of lashes. Matkif la abaye. V'dichshav mehem meziach hachoshem alefod v'mesir bade aron. Abaye says we should add also someone who loosens the choshen, the breastplate, from on the ephod, and also if one removes the rods from the aron, assuming this is a time back when there was an aron and it had rods in it. So if someone would do that, it has to be related also to his plowing. So that means he loosens the breastplate. He's wearing the breastplate himself while he is plowing. So all the time that he is wearing it, it's loose from where it should be on the ephod. And also he's using the rods of the ark to plow. And you may not remove them. And all the time that it's removed, that would be its own problem. So then you'd add also two more here. And the prohibition is lo yasudu and lo yizachachoshen. So that's two pesukim. Do not remove the rods and do not loosen the choshen. We don't answer this either. Matkif ladav asher v'dichshav nameha choresh ba'aseh asherah v'azatemecha ve'lo yidbak b'yadecha me'uma. Rav Ashi says, why not add also that he is plowing with wood that is from an asherah tree? Plows sometimes are made out of wood. And the prohibition was there should not cleave to your hand anything from idolatry. That means using idolatry, getting benefit out of it. Matkif laravina v'dichshav nama kosesi lanot tovot v'azatemecha ki mimenu tochel ve'oto lo tichrot. Ravina says you should count also someone who cuts down good trees. And the pasuk says, do not cut down good trees because you should eat from them. So fruit trees, even in a siege, one is not allowed to cut down. So maybe while plowing, he's also removing fruit trees. That would be another prohibition. That asked to be maneh. Why not count also someone who makes a vow, I am not going to plow on Yom Tov. Then he plows on Yom Tov, so that's another violation. So why not add this one? Okay, the previous 7 we had no answer to, but this 8th one, there is a conversation back. Hatam la kachala shivua mushpa ve'omed mahar Sinai hu. No, there, that vow would not apply because he already made a vow. Everybody made a vow on Har Sinai that we are not going to do melacha on Yom Tov, and therefore you can't make another vow on top of a vow that already applies. And so that's why the Mishnah did not count this one. But Rabbi Zera follows up and says, well, it could apply if one makes a vow, I'm not going to plow, not on a weekday, and also not on Yom Tov, all one vow. Because since it will apply to the weekdays, it applies also on Yom Tov. This is called an Isur Kolel. Even if there is already a prohibition or already a vow, if they make another vow that includes more than the first vow did, and like in this case, it's going to add a prohibition to work days, then the entire vow applies and will apply also on Yom Tov, and that will be another count. And the answer is midi diite b'she'ela lakatane. No, if there's something that can be annulled, it's not included in the Mishnah. Someone makes a vow, they can always go to a sage to annul it, and then not get lashes for it, so we're not counting things like that. We ask, Velo v'hareh hekdesh. Hold on, you're not counting things that you can annul. You can annul something consecrated. You consecrate an animal, and so you can annul that consecration. Yet that was one of the items that was listed in the Mishnah, that the animal itself was hekdesh that you used, and you can't benefit from it. So we answer bebechor. No, we're not talking about an animal that you consecrated, but rather that was a bechor, which means it's consecrated consecrated from birth. You can't annul a bechor, is born first. So that's the case of the Mishnah. V'adei Nazir, hold on, you said it was a Nazir, and he's walking through a place where there are corpses. And the Nazir, that's a vow that can be annulled. So the answer is Ben Nazir Shimshon. If someone takes a vow, like I'm going to be a Nazir like Shimshon, that cannot be annulled. Nazir Shimshon bad itamu yelemetimhu. Hold on, if someone says I'm going to be a Nazir like Shimshon, is he prohibited from becoming Tameh Lamet? Shimshon was a unique figure in that although he was a Nazir, he couldn't cut his hair and drink wine, but he was allowed to be Tameh Lamet because he's a warrior. He's dealing with dead bodies all the time. And so if a person says, I'm going to be like Nazir Shimshon, then you're right, although you cannot annul it, but he can become Tameh Lamet and be in the cemetery. Rather, we'll answer back this question over here to say that we're talking about a Tana who says that there's no such thing as Isur Kolel. Well, if something is prohibited, even if he makes another vow that includes more things, nevertheless, that does not apply because some of the vow applies to something that was already prohibited or you already made a vow. And therefore, if he makes a vow, I'm not going to do any melacha on Yom Tov or Chol, and then he does melacha on Yom Tov, there will not be an extra prohibition. And so at least this last question we did answer successfully, but the first 7 challenges we did not provide an answer to, and so one could come up with a case where one would plow and yet violate even more sets of lashes. Amar Rabbi Hoshaya, Rabbi Ashor Pesulei HaMuktashim Lokeh Shenayim. Rabbi Hoshaya teaches a curious law that if someone has a bull that was made hekdesh, so it's consecrated, but then it gets a blemish in it, so it can no longer be sacrificed. So then you redeem it for money, and then one can slaughter it and eat it. However, one also cannot derive benefit or work it. So it has a dual status. In part, it is still holy. In part, it is not holy. And therefore, Rabbi Hoshaya says we consider this animal to be, at least half of it, the same law as a different species. So it's half one species, half another. Even though it's just a bull, nevertheless, the fact that some of it is chulin and some of it is hekdesh, that makes it as if it's 2 species. Therefore, if someone takes this bull that was consecrated and now has a blemish and mates it with a cow, he gets 2 liabilities. Number 1, because he is mating this, even though it's a bull and a cow, which are the same species, which otherwise would be permitted, because of its half consecration, that itself is considered like a different species, and that is one liability of mating 2 species, kil'ayim, and the other one is because he is benefiting from, he's using a animal that was consecrated, even though it was now redeemed. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amanhig b'shor pesulei hamuktashim lokeh, sharei guf echad hu v'asau katub kishnei gufim. Rabbi Yitzchak takes the same principle and takes it even one step further, that if someone drives and uses an ox that is like this, it was consecrated and now has a blemish, and you redeemed it, and he drives it to pull a plow, he gets lashes. In fact, 2 sets of lashes. Number 1, because it was hekdesh animal and you can't use that animal anymore. Although you're allowed to slaughter it and eat it, but while it's alive, you cannot use it. That's 1. And then you'd also get another set of lashes, which is one he's talking about, lokeh, for working diverse animals, even though it's only one animal, but this animal is considered split in 2. So that's what he says here. It's one body, but the Torah treats it as if it's 2 bodies, because on the one hand, it's consecrated. On the other hand, it's not consecrated. And that difference is as if it's 2 species, but it's in one. So just using this one animal is a violation of working 2 species together. Next Mishnah, Kama Malkin Oto, Arba'im Chaser Achat, Shneimar B'mispar Arba'im, Minyan Shu Samuch LeArba'im. How many lashes does someone get who is liable to lashes? And the answer is 40 minus 1, in other words, 39. Because the Pasuk says, B'mispar Arba'im, the number of 40. It doesn't just say 40, so that means it's a number of 40, a number that is near 40, not quite 40, but up to 40, but not including, so that means 39. 39. Rabbi Yehuda omer 40 shelemot hu lokev, hechan hu loket hayetera ben ketefav. Rabbi Yehuda says he gets 40 lashes fully, not 39, but full 40. And where does he get the extra one, the last one, between his shoulders? What he means by the extra one is that the lashes are given on 3 different places on the body, and therefore the number of lashes has to be divisible by 3. So then you get up to 39, which is divisible by 3, but 40 is an extra one. So he is explaining, according to Tanakama, if it's 39, so that's easy, it's divisible by 3. But according to Yehuda, if it's 40, where's the extra one? So he explains that it's between his shoulders. And this is the principle that we just assumed, that when we make an assessment, 39, according to Tanakama, is the max, but that's only if the person can handle 39. If the person is weak and they'll die if they get 39, then we make an assessment with doctors, how many can this person handle? And it's always going to be a number divisible by 3, so that if you say, well, this guy can handle 10, you don't say 10, but rather you say 9. Amadu lekabel 40 veloke miksat. If the doctors came and said, this guy can handle 40, a full amount, let's say 39, and then they started giving him some lashes, they gave him a few lashes, and then the doctors reassessed him, v'amdu she'en yachol lekabel 40 patur, and they realized, we said 40 originally, but now we see he can't handle it, so then that's it. You don't give him any more. He is exempt from the rest of the lashes. Whatever he had so far, we stop there. Amadu lekabel shemone asre, umishalaka amdu she'achol hu lekabel 40 patur. And how about the other way around? At first, they assessed that this guy can handle only 18, but now they're giving him lashes, and then they realize, oh, he's stronger than we thought. He could handle 40. Also, he's exempt from anything above 18. So we take the lower number either of the assessment or of what he can actually, or of the reassessment of what he can actually handle. It's always going to be the lower of the 2 numbers. My ta'ama, what's the source for Tanakama who says that we give 39 and not 40? And the answer is iketib 40 b'mispar, hava amina 40 b'minyana, hashta dichtib b'mispar 40, minyan shehu sochem et 40. If the pasuk says 40 in number, I would say exactly 40. You count up to 40. But instead it says by the number of 40. So that means a number that approaches 40 by putting mispar beforehand instead of after the number 40. Amar Rava, kama tipesha she'ar anashe dekaimi mikamed sefer Torah v'la kami mikamed gabra rabba deilu besefer Torah ketib 40 v'atu rabbanan basru hada. Rava says, how foolish are many people, because they'll stand for a sefer Torah, but they don't stand for a great sage. Because why should they stand before a great sage? Because look, the Torah itself says 40, which seems pretty clear. Like, you can't get a clearer law than hit him 40 times. And yet the rabbis come and they interpret that to mean 39. So you see, the authority of how to interpret the Torah is entrusted to the rabbis. So yes, of course you should stand up for a Sefer Torah, but all the more so you should stand up for the rabbis who are authorized to rule what the Torah means, and they can even do so when it's not the simple reading of the Torah. So you see how much the authority of the rabbis is in interpreting the Torah. So if you're going to stand up for a Torah, then that would be foolish not to stand up for the powerful interpreters of the Torah. Rabbi Yehuda omer 40 shelemot. Rabbi Yehuda says 40, not 39. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, my tamad Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's source? Asked Rabbi Yitzchak, tichtiv, ma Makkot ha'ele ben yadecha, v'amar asher uketi ben me'ahavai. It's a pasuk in Zechariah, where someone, it's not clear whom, seems to be talking about a false prophet, and someone says, sees him and he has lashes on him, he has wounds on him, and someone says, what are these wounds that are between, it says arms, it says hands, but it means arms. What are all these wounds between your arms on your back? And he answers, because the house of my beloved hit me. Now the house of the beloved right now now we're assuming that means the Sanhedrin, that this guy, he was a false prophet, and the Sanhedrin came and said, hey, don't do that, and they gave him lashes in order to rebuke him, and he appreciated that rebuke. He says, yes, because they love me, they wanted to set me on the right path, and that's why I got all of these lashes. Now notice that it says between your arms, in other words, between the shoulders. Well, why would he have one between the shoulders? He has many more all over his body, wherever they lashed him, but the one specifically between the shoulders, that is a proof for the Rabbi Yehuda, because that would be the odd one out. That's the Rabbi Yehuda says, that the 40th one that doesn't land in any of the regular 3 places, you put it between the shoulders, so that shows that he got one between the shoulders. That would be the 40th one. And the rabbis say, no, this is not talking about someone who was hit by the Sanhedrin with official Makkot, but rather it's talking about a student. He wasn't studying so well, and the teacher, his beloved, the teacher of course loves the student, but needs to encourage him and rebuke him. So the teacher hit him between his shoulders, and so that's why it's talking about between the shoulders. He didn't get 40, it wasn't by a betin, and therefore, according to Rabbanan, you cannot learn anything from this pasuk. And omdim ela b'makot ha'reuyot. The Mishnah continues and says, we assess a number that's divisible by 3, and then went on to say that we pick the lower number so that if the doctors first say that he can get 18, and then he starts getting flogged, and we see that, oh, actually he can get 40, then we do not change it to 40 because we see he's stronger, but rather he stays at the 18, and he doesn't get any further. So Gemara comments, laka'in, lo laka'ala. So only if he started getting hit, then we do not increase it. But if he did not start getting hit, then we do increase it. In other words, the doctors come and say he can handle 18, and we start giving him the 18, and then the doctors say he's very strong, he can handle 40. We only give him max 18, we don't give him any more. But if the doctors came and said 18, and then before they started doing anything, the doctors came again sometime later, and they said, actually, he's pretty strong, he can handle 40. In that case, we actually do give him 40 because we didn't start yet. That's the inference from the Mishnah. Urminhu. However, we have a contradiction from a Baraita. Amadu lekabel 40 v'chazru v'amdu she'en yachol lekabel 40 patur. If they assess that he can handle 40, but then they reassess and says, no, he can't handle 40, so he doesn't get the 40. Amaduhu lekabel shemone asre v'chazru v'amdu she'yachol lekabel 40 patur. If they assess that he can get 18, and then they came back and assessed that he can get 40, then he doesn't get any. And it sounds like even if they didn't start yet. So why is that? We just said if they didn't start yet at all, then they reassess and they up the number. But here, they didn't start. They said 18, and then chazru, and they said 40, and yet now we're going to give them 40. That's the question. Amar Rav Sheshat la kashya. Ha da'amaduhu leyomeh, ha da'amaduhu lemachar, ul yoma ochara. Rav Sheshat says there's no contradiction. When the Mishnah says, or we infer from the Mishnah, that if you didn't start yet and he's reassessed, then you change the number and you'll give him 40, even though the first assessment was 18. That's talking about when the reassessment happens on that very same day. The very same day, his condition didn't change. He's the same person. It's the same day. He didn't get stronger or weaker. And that means that the first assessment was simply mistaken. They said 18. They come back a little bit later, the same day, and before they started, it says actually it's 40. So then we throw out the first assessment because it was simply wrong, and we give him the 40. If they started already, then we stick with that assessment because that is an official assessment, and we're not going to change it after we started. Oh, that's the Mishnah. The Baraita is talking about where the assessment happens on one day, but for whatever reason, they didn't hit him on that day, and then the next day or sometime later is when they actually come around to give him lashes, and then they assess him again. Well, on the first day they said 18, and now a few days later, they say, oh, he can handle 40. The initial assessment was not a mistake. On that day, it's very likely that, in fact, on that day, he could handle only 18. Maybe he was sick that day. But then a week later, he got better, and then he could handle 40. In that case, because he underwent a change, but the assessment that was first an assessment was accurate, and therefore that assessment stands. That's the legally a legitimate one that's entered into the books, he could handle 18. And since it was a correct assessment, we continue with that. And even though he gets stronger a few days later, we don't change the assessment on that account. Avad avera sheyesh ba shnei lavin. Amaduhu omed echad, lokeh upatur. Ve'im lav lokeh umitrapeh vechozer velokeh. If someone violated a sin for which one is liable to 2 sets of lashes, so if they give him an assessment, one assessment, they give him one assessment for both punishments, then he gets 1 round of lashes and that's it. That's all. Even if the number is less than 40, that 40, well, that's all he can handle. So we're going to give him both sets of lashes at once. So he deserves 80. Okay, of the 80, how many can he handle? We say 20. Then he gets 20 and that's it. He's exempt. That covers both of the liabilities. However, if he's not assessed all at once, he's assessed separately. If they assess him, okay, he's liable to 1 set for 40. How many can he handle? They say 20. So they give him 20 and then he gets better, whatever. A couple of weeks later, he's better. Then we say, okay, let's bring him back for the second count, and they assess him again, and now he can handle another 20. So then they go ahead again. So it all depends on whether they assess him at once for both or it's 2 separate assessments. We ask, V'hatanya, en omdim omed echad lishnei lavin. Hold on, there's a braita that says we do not make 1 assessment for 2 prohibitions. So what do you mean that you made 1 assessment for 2 prohibitions? This braita says that 1 assessment does not count for 2 prohibitions. You'd assess him and then you'd assess him again. We're just asking the doctors, how many can he handle? So that assessment will only cover 1 prohibition. It's not going to count for 2 according to this braita. So how would you ever have a case where it counts for 2? Amar Rav Sheshad la kashya, hada madu l'arba'im v'chada, hada madu l'arba'im v'tarteh. Rav Sheshad says there's no contradiction. In the braita, when it says that we only do 1, that's talking about a case where they asked the doctors, how many can you handle? They said 41. And we don't give 41 because it has to be divisible by 3. So you're always going to go to a number lower that's divisible by 3. That would be 39. So even though they said 41, which is more than 40 and would apply to 2 separate counts, but in the end we only give him 39, and therefore that will count just for 1. That's what the Baraita is talking about, where if it's any number that we give him that's under 40, then that counts for 1, and we'll bring him back for another set of lashes. Whereas the Mishnah was talking about where the doctor said he can handle 42, and they give him 42. Because that number is more than 40, obviously it doesn't cover only 1 sin, but rather both sins. So even though it's only 42, if he came on 2 separate occasions, then altogether he probably would have been able to handle more. But because the assessment was more than 40, it does count for 2. But if the assessment is less than 40, then it counts only for 1. Next Mishnah, Kesad Malkin Oto. How do we give a person lashes? Kofeh shete yadav al ha'amud helach vehelach. V'chazan ha'kneset ochez bibgadav im nikre'u nikre'u. Im nifremu ad shehu megale et libo. We take the convict and we tie his 2 hands to a post that's shorter than he is. That way he'll be leaning over. That's how he has to be, leaning over with his back towards the person doing the whipping. The person who gives the whipping is called Chazan HaKnesset. Chazan does not mean the cantor. In Mishnah, Chazan means the attendant of the congregation. So he's appointed to be in charge of this. And he will grab onto the convict's clothing and pull it off. And it has to come off. It doesn't matter. He doesn't have to take it off carefully. If it rips, it rips. If it comes out off at the seams, then it comes off at the seams. And that is a way of disheveling and shaming the person, in addition to as part of the lashes that he will get. And he doesn't have to take off the clothes altogether, but rather he rips his shirt until the chest of the convict is bared, because he's going to be hitting him, in fact, on the chest, and so the whip has to reach his skin. There's a stone behind the convict upon which the chazan will stand to have some height so we can whip him better. Chazan HaKnesset omed alav ursua biyado shel egel kefula echad lishnayim ushnayim le'arba'a ushne resuot shel chamor olot v'yoredot ba. The chazan will stand upon him, meaning behind and above him, and he's going to hold the whip. The whip is made out of calf calfskin, and it's doubled into two, and the two are doubled into four, and there are also two straps of leather from a donkey that are attached to it going up and down. So here's a picture of it. So here's the calfskin on the inside, and that's doubled over, and there's another one doubled, so that makes four layers all together. And then there's donkey hide also that's attached to it on this side and on that side. And we're going to see the measurements. The handle has to be a tefach, and also the width of this entire thing has to be a tefach. Yada tefach v'rochba tefach v'rosha magat al pi kereso. And the length of it has to be long enough that when he whips him, if he whips him around the back, around on the side of him, then it will reach his navel. So when a third of them are whipping him on the chest, but he doesn't turn around. Instead, he whips him from the back around his side, and so it has to be able to reach his navel. So that's how long it has to be. So a third of the lashes will be in front of him on his chest, and the other 2/3 will be behind him, each on one shoulder. So the left shoulder, the right shoulder, and then around him till it reaches the front. And the convict should not be sitting, nor should it be standing, but rather bending over or lying down, as it says that the judge will make him lie down. So not lying down on a bed. It means in a prone position, in other words, leaning over. The one who's hitting him hits him using one hand. He only holds the whip with one hand, but with all of his strength. So he's going to read these pisukim, which are appropriate and very powerful. So while the whipping is happening, someone's reading this. If you fail to observe all the terms of these teachings that are written in this book, and to revere his honored and awesome name, Hashem, then God will inflict extraordinary plagues on you and your offspring, strange and lasting plagues, malignant and chronic diseases. In context, talking about plagues that Hashem gives, that's called a makkah. But we read it in this case because makkah also refers to lashes, and so we want to make sure it's clear to the convict and to everybody else that he is getting lashes because he violated the Torah. And so if it's a lot of lashes, though, those pisukim only take a few seconds, so then the reader will continue. So then we'll continue with a pasuk from the beginning of the chapter where it says you must follow all the words of this berit, and then and then he concludes with the pasuk in Tehillim that Hashem is merciful and He will atone for sin, so that this punishment will be an atonement. And then if it's still going on, if there's still more time because there are more lashes, then he repeats those pasukim. V'imet tachat yado patur. If the convict dies because of too many lashes, even though the doctors assess that he can handle it, but let's say they were wrong, and the guy dies, then the one who's giving the lashes is not liable because he did it by mistake, and he did it because he's an agent of the court, and the doctor said that this is the number he can handle. So he doesn't get any punishment at all. If, however, the whipper gave one more than the doctor said he should give, and because of that the person died, then he goes into exile, into a ir miklat, because he went extra, so he's somewhat liable. He's negligent. It can happen. He didn't do it on purpose. He miscounted. He made a mistake, and he hit him one too many times. So because it's negligent, but it's still bishogeg, then he goes to exile. Nitkalkel ben berei ben b'mayim patur. If the convict sullied himself, whether number 2 or number 1, then he is not liable to any more lashes. That shame itself says, okay, that's enough. Rabbi Yehuda omer ha'ish berei va'isha b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction between a man and a woman, and he says a man for or he has a higher threshold of shame. So that's if he sees number 2, then he's okay. That's enough. Whereas for a woman, even just number 1, we say that's enough of a shame, punishment, and then we stop the lashes there. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.